We are so excited to introduce our listeners to a new app that just launched. Basecamp Ed is a community building platform for parents to find like-minded families and dedicated teachers in your area. Whether you homeschool your children, are curious about it, or simply want to build extracurricular activities, Basecamp Ed has you covered. Connect with local parents to create co-ops, form groups based on your child's interests, and use the calendar to schedule events with ease. Teachers and coaches can also create profiles and list their credentials for parents to use as a way to supplement subjects and activities. Homeschooling was never meant to be done alone. It takes a village. Build it with Basecamp Ed. Take advantage of this free resource and go download it today. You can also follow them on Instagram and Facebook at Basecamp Ed app for the latest updates.
Pick based on your needs, because Maslow's hierarchy of needs exists for a reason.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
our complete disconnect of just telling these high schoolers, oh yeah, just follow your hearts or your random personality tests. I just don't, I get a lot of questions about that, about the personality tests and strengths assessment. I'm like, your high school strengths or passions should not be the thing dictating what you are spending $100,000 on. It definitely should not be the thing dictating whatever you're going to do for work.
From the Florida Parent Educators Association, home of the largest homeschool convention in America, this is the Not by the Book podcast. I'm your host, FPEA Chairman Suzanne Nunn, and together we will hear from guests who share their journey to who and where they are today. Each one of them at some point left the expected path, ripped the page out of the book that says you have to do it like this, and made their own way. I hope these conversations inspire you as much as they do me. Today I am chatting with Hannah Maruyama of the Degree Free Way. What an interesting story she has from her own personal experiences growing up and then as a college student herself, and how it was that she began to discover the way to so many careers without having to purchase first. The statistics and information we talk through are a bit mind-blowing, and the opportunities are just amazing. Listen with me now.
I had, I think, what I would call a golden childhood. I'll give that to my mom, especially because she did homeschool us. My dad was in the military, and so we moved around a lot. And because of that moving around, it necessitated my mom having to homeschool myself and my other three siblings. I am the oldest. And man, we just played and we did so much. We just did so much stuff that you can really only do when you have that freedom and that flexibility of being homeschooled. And I did go to every different type of school. So I got into a charter school at one point. I did spend a little time in public school, a little time in a couple private schools, during different periods of time when my mom either had to put one or two of us or three of us, just depending on the time of life.
So you got
so variety.
Have a little bit of opportunity to compare these things.
Yes.
And appreciate, right?
Yes, and be grateful for how much freedom I had when I was home. And that was something that from the very get-go I really valued, was the freedom to do as I pleased and to learn the things that I wanted to learn and to read extensively. I read a lot. I read everything I could get my hands on, and my mom encouraged that, fostered that. One of her big things that she built for us while we were kids was a massive library. And it was just a huge bookcase, and it just had a ton of books, and just all kinds of, every kind of book you can think of. And we just read a lot, and she read aloud to us as well.
I find that, people who are well-read are just some of the most interesting people in life. I think that when you read, it gives you so much to dream about and think about, and courage to maybe try things that you wouldn't, especially when you read a lot of different types of literature or books. So I find that that's really interesting. And also that you really embrace the fact that you had a lot of freedom. And, moving forward, I'm thinking that freedom probably has played a lot too into your way of thinking about what you do today and how you try to help families, because that is something very unique to homeschooling that is, I think people recognize and enjoy, but I don't know that everybody embraces it so much. It's typical for us to see families who will maybe pull their kids out of school And maybe even like me, I was not homeschooled. I was in public school and private school and, public education my whole life. So when I pulled my kids and, started homeschooling, your first thought is, I'm just bringing school home, right? You don't understand the freedom you have to really just do what you want to do. And so I think that that's a huge component that even though we know it, we don't always embrace it and get it.
I agree with that. I think too that might have played into why my experience was so freeform. My husband and I have talked at length about the way that I was homeschooled because I would describe the way that I was homeschooled closer to the OG way. That's what I call it, as opposed to this new wave of homeschoolers, which is just different, as you well know. It's just different reasons, different motivations, different practices. And so because of that, my mom is closer to the original movement of homeschoolers, not those that were the ones having to actively go in and fight legislation and do all of this, and do all of these, all of these regulatory battles. But my mom benefited from the fact that they had fought an existing structure and won. And then because my mom was a nurse, and so, but she had stopped being a nurse when I was born. And so because of that, I think a lot of people who are comfortable with the idea of homeschooling from the beginning are people with backgrounds in education. And typically they do come from public school backgrounds because you have to have a degree to be a public school teacher. And so my mom just didn't have that. She didn't really have to unlearn that structure. She never had it. And so her version of homeschooling was really just what worked for her, what interested her, because she's a curious person as well. And so it was just a lot of reading, a lot of history. One of the things that my husband and I have talked over at length, my husband Ryan, is that I wasn't made to do enough math. The irony of that being, though, that I did work in something, I did end up working in tech and in AI and machine learning. So it didn't really affect me that much, but that's something that definitely as an adult, I wish I had focused more on. But I think I experienced outsized benefits from just being able to read and let my mind wander wherever I was curious. And so I did end up very passionate about philosophy and history and the way that things work, even economics to an extent as well, which plays into why I feel the way I do about college now.
Yeah. Well, and I think too that if you can read and if you're curious and want to learn, right, then at that point in juncture where you're like, man, I needed more math back then for this. You can learn it now. And you know how to learn it, how to do it most effectively for you, right? And it's just, I feel like you teach your kids to learn effectively and they're lifelong learners, And then we should always be growing and educating ourselves, anyway. So I think that that's important. But
it is important. And I think that is really where homeschoolers are going to see the most outsized advantage to going into this new, what I'll call the AI renaissance. And that's something that they are just going to be able to leverage these really powerful tools in an unbelievable way because they have that freedom and they have their parents' support in learning, and amazing things are going to come out of that. Amazing things. I cannot wait to see what happens.
No, yeah, I hear and I agree. I think that, it's just, I've said that so many times that the kids who are being home educated right now are going to be just the wide open thinkers and creators and, educators of the future. I mean, there's so much at their disposal and so much freedom to take it all in, right? So I think that that's really great. So, okay, homeschooled, pretty free roaming childhood, right? But let's fast forward a little bit, maybe to high school or even before. When were you thinking, okay, one day I'm going to get done with this era of my life and I'm going to want to do something else? Like, what is that going to be? What kind of career? What were your interests in that direction?
So this is where my experience here really formed how I think about the way that we teach young adults to pick work and to pick their careers. And I went into high school. So my family was stationed in Hawaii. So at the time, at the end of middle school, I was homeschooled. And so at the end of middle school, I was still being homeschooled, as were all of my siblings. And when we moved to Savannah, Georgia, because my dad got stationed there. And so when we did that, I transitioned into high school. So I had applied to a chartered art school that's a feeder to SCAD, which is Savannah College of Art and Design.
Right.
I did end up getting in there for sketching, for drawing. And, pretty labor intensive process. You have to audition and take your portfolio in and all this kind of stuff. And so I did get in there, but I went into that school and I was there for, I think, 3 days, and there was just something off about the environment, which now I believe there was just something, it was just not the right fit. I think it was probably just God telling me that's not where you're supposed to be. And so I told my mom, I said, something is just not right with that place. I don't know. I don't want to be there. I don't think that I'm supposed to be there. And I do think now, looking back on it, I'm glad, because I can see how that trajectory would have changed my life. And I saw what happened to the other kids my age who went through that school and what happened to them. And I'm glad I didn't stay in that environment. So that was kind of, I think back on that, and that was an interesting experience. But then I ended up going to a private school in Savannah, Georgia for a little while, and then had a really unfortunate experience while my dad was deployed at the school. And so I had to transfer to a different private school. My mom started working at that school in order to get tuition for my siblings and I. So she became the school nurse so that they could afford to send us, because it was, it's expensive.
Pricey,
and so, and so my mom she was homeschooling my youngest sister at the time. And then she started working at the school as a school nurse so that we could all go, to offset the cost. And so, because 4 kids is a lot of kids.
Definitely.
And so I ended up going to this private school in Savannah for 2 years in high school. So that would have been my sophomore, junior year. So I went to this other private high school. While there was a history teacher who was also my soccer coach. His name is Michael Carswell. He actually walked me down the aisle at my wedding. So that tells you the formative place that he had in my life. But I remember I got into he was the teacher for AP history. There was only about 6 kids in this class, a very small school. And I remember the first day of class, he was telling me to pay attention in class. And I said, I don't need to pay attention to you because I already know everything that you're teaching. and I wasn't rude. I just said factually, I said, I already know all of this. And he said, oh yeah? He said, okay, well, here's the test. And so he gave me the AP history test. And I want to preface this with, I was struggling with basic mathematics, but I was really good at history. And I passed the test with flying colors. And so he left me alone for the rest of the year and I did whatever I wanted. And then the other kids in the class were also my friends. Like they were my soccer teammates, and they all were like, wait, that's not fair. We want to take the test. So they took the test also, but they didn't pass the test, so they had to pay attention in class.
That's funny.
But because of the small class size, I had a great deal of freedom. And I did learn a lot from Carswell, just in general, about teaching, about life. One of the things that I was able to do was I was also just able to write really well, simply because of the amount of reading that I did. And so I did really well in English. I excelled in English, AP English, and I was able to write really quickly as well. Got good grades. It came very easily to me. Again, simultaneously while I'm struggling with basic mathematics.
Right.
But so it was, you should go to college to be an English professor. You should go teach English. You should go into journalism, because unfortunately schools and teachers in general have very limited vocational creativity. They don't know about a lot of jobs. And so their range of what somebody could do with an affinity for English is teach English or write for or go get a journalism degree, both of which are
your most basic common thoughts, though. It's not, there's this wide field of opportunity, right?
Yes. And so Carswell, one of these days, ended up telling me actually that he just said, you're bored here. This is my junior year. And he said, you're bored. You need to leave. It's time for you to go. He said, you need to go dual enroll at the local college. He's like, get out of here. You don't need to be, I was 16 and a half at the time. And so I then went through the process of dual enrolling at the local, there's a university there that's now part of Georgia Southern. It was called Armstrong at the time. So my senior year of high school, I did not step foot on a high school campus. I was fully at the local college, and I was taking I was taking a full course load, and I just could not, did not do well. Not because I didn't get good grades, but because I found the environment to be extremely anti-intellectual, and I found that my questions were not welcome. Opinions that differentiated from the wider political narrative were not welcome. I remember distinctly a class that I had with an economics professor who was a refugee from another country, actually. And she had us write an opinion piece about something. And I wrote an opinion. It was an economics paper. And so I wrote an economics opinion piece. She failed me on this piece. And I asked her why. And she said, because she didn't like my opinion. And I just went, okay. So I took this.
That's the measure.
And that was shocking to me. This was it was jarring to me, because I thought, isn't this where all the smart people are? That's what I've been told. This is what this is the bastion of, of the pursuit of free thought and the pursuit of new ideas and enlightenment. And yet, what is happening here? So I took this opinion piece that she just failed me with, and I went to the local university. I went to the paper at the university, and I gave it to the editor, and he read it. And I think he just got a kick out of me, because I was just, I was like I was a teenage kid. I was like, here.
Exactly right.
And so he took it, and he said, this is really good. And so he published it, and then he hired me, and he started paying me to write for the paper. And so I actually became the youngest paid writer on that college campus. And so I ended up with a column, and I was just writing about current events and stuff like that. But I just really had a hard time, like I said, intellectually speaking, with the professors in general, because I just found this very closed-minded, strange, groupthink, cult-like experience. And this is at a low-level university too. This isn't some prestigious, some prestigious university. It was a university, but it was not.
It's not
and
Harvard
so I just
or
went,
Yale or whatever.
No, no. I don't think that the people that were teaching there had earned the right to that, to the amount of pretense that they were putting forth. And so that was just really hard for me. And I remember distinctly one day too, I had had enough of it. And I was sitting in a sociology class. I had an art class right before that, art appreciation class. And the professor was just going on and on about Jackson Pollock, who I just can't stand. And I just went, I can't believe I'm sitting here paying for this, because I was working as well at the time. And then I went to my sociology class, and the lady that was teaching the sociology class was also just a very just dogmatic, political theory, just kind of wild. And I just went, I don't want to be here. And I sat down to take this midterm in sociology, and I just couldn't do it one more second. And so I tore the term in half, and I threw it in the trash, and I left, and I never looked back. It was just so frustrating to me, looking back on it now, that this place that I thought, like, this is where you go. This is where you go to learn. This is I should be really at home here, right? Theoretically speaking, but I wasn't. And that really fractured my worldview. And then after that, I started reading again, because you don't read while you're in college. Nobody does. They're busy doing
what they
whatever.
Want you to read, right?
Right. You read, you read Kate Chopin, you read whatever feminist literature they want you to read. That's really boring and trite, and that I'd already read. And so I was bored. Is a huge theme here. And at that point, I just went, I just can't do this anymore. And so I left. And, after that, I didn't really leave with a plan. It didn't help that I was being faced with then having to pay, because I would have been in my freshman year of college. So I ended up going for about a year and a half. I'd clept a bunch of classes, so I was ahead, but I just went, this isn't the right place for me, and it's not somewhere I'm going to learn, and I'm definitely not going to pay to be here to not learn anything from people who I don't really feel a great respect for, academically speaking. And so, but that was an interesting time for me, for sure.
It's funny that you mentioned the sociology class, because I went to college, and in my sociology class, I would say I had a very similar experience. I ended up leaving the class because I really couldn't tolerate the dogmatic, approach of this professor in that class, and the total and complete distaste for anyone who didn't agree with him. Like, it was just, again, like you're saying, it was not anywhere where there was any freedom to think differently than he was thinking, And so that was one of the classes. And I had a conversation with a high school student the other day, and I was telling him he was dual enrolled and doing sociology in the summer. And I was like, ooh, it's like, that was not my class. It was not mine.
Yeah.
So I think it's funny that you mentioned that. So you had an interesting foot in the door with college and your experience there. Let's talk a little bit too now about where you went from there, and when did you meet your husband, and what were your career paths, and where were you headed at this point?
Sure. So this is where it gets a little more interesting because, like I said, I started to read again after I left college, after I broke out, and I started to read Ayn Rand, and I had never read her before, and that makes sense that you wouldn't read her on a college campus because professors hate her, and that's because she hated them, and so she's still wildly unpopular with college professors. But I started reading about her. I started reading about objectivism. I just started reading about this worldview, and I just found it to be very interesting. It resonated with a lot of the things that I had seen on the college campus that I couldn't really identify or name. And then I suddenly had labels for them. And that was really interesting and fairly formative for me, just learning about more rationality and the way that she looked at the world and the way that she looked at economics and human motivation and incentive. And so and all this time, I wasn't doing anything glamorous. I was working in a bar. I was working in an Irish pub in Savannah, Georgia that was historic, very cool. I learned a lot. And I then decided to move home. I decided to move back to Hawaii because that's where we had just come from. And so I was living with two girls who were my best friends. And I said, hey, let's go move to Hawaii. And so we sold everything and just took a car. And then we drove across the country and sold the car and moved to Hawaii. And it's very expensive there.
Oh, yeah.
And so we lived very shoestring in Hawaii, but we were very happy. So we all shared a 2-bedroom, and the two girls and I shared a room, and then we rented out the other room. And we just, I think I worked 3 jobs at a time. Wow. I worked as a deckhand. I was a nanny. I was a surf teacher for small children. I taught swim lessons because I was a lifeguard. I waitressed because I had experience doing that. I worked at BJ Penn's, one of his gyms. Like I just did whatever I just did whatever. Whatever opportunities were there, I took. And I had a lot of fun. Like I took swing dancing. Oh, there's a swing dancing club there. I took, it's like there's like a World War II, scene there. So I took those. I took some Japanese meetups, like for free. I just, went and started learning stuff. So while I was there with my best friends, I met my husband working at a restaurant in Waikiki. And my husband was bartending and I was waitressing, and we just had a whirlwind romance, but it was very quick. And then I decided I had gotten a job offer from a family friend. And so I moved back to work on his Senate campaign in Mississippi. And so I moved back. On the plane, it fell through. And so, so I packed everything up, sold everything again. I had nothing. I had a suitcase. I moved out there with a suitcase. I came back with a suitcase, and it fell through on the plane. I just went, what am I going to do? And so I went back to live with my mom for a little bit. I went to a conference with her, and then I ended up getting recruited to work as an investigative journalist for a job that required a degree. This is the first sign of the crack that I started to doubt some things. Because I'm like, oh, okay, well, they say it requires a degree. It doesn't, though, obviously, because they just gave this job to me. My husband then moved to North Carolina, which is unusual because he's born and raised from Hawaii. He's native Hawaiian. He had never left. And so he moved with his one friend who was living in Raleigh at the time, so very close to Savannah. I moved back to Savannah to work at that same bar that I'd been working at. My husband then came down to see me. We had decided not to continue our relationship because we were far apart, and we were just like, that never works.
He
comes down, and this is all within the span of 6 months. And he comes down, he says, I love you. I said, that's crazy. And then, and then a few months later, I did end up following through with the job offer. I moved to New York for this investigative journalism role. My husband then got a job offer at a small flight school in California, working as a bookkeeper. And so he decided he was going to move to California because he had always wanted to live near San Francisco. And so he moved. He moved. in the middle of this move, he was driving across America. In this time, he took a huge road trip and he drove all across America for about 3 weeks, lived in his car, just the great American road trip.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think he was in Chicago, and we had decided again that it wasn't going to work because he was going to the other side of the country.
And world over there.
Yeah. And we're just like, okay, the stars are just not aligning here. And I remember distinctly because he'd asked me to marry him before he left. And I was like, no, that's crazy. I don't know you well enough to do that. And then he was in Chicago and I was in New York. He was like on his drive to California, and I called him and I said, yeah, no, come back and do propose to me actually, because I love you too. So he proposed to me, and then he moved back to California, and then ended up moving to New York. We hated the cold. So then we moved to Georgia for a little bit and then moved back to Hawaii because he became a firefighter. So it was
lots of moving around.
Yes.
Young adventure, young love,
Yes.
all of the things.
Yes.
That's
I do.
good.
I'm all for getting married young, though. I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, big fan of it.
And so you guys ended up back in Hawaii and then at that point?
We did.
And were you working toward a degree? Were you working toward a career? And he was a firefighter.
He was a firefighter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he had gotten into the fire department there, which is very competitive. Again, they get thousands of applicants and they only select 50. And they did pick him because he worked really, really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. He put in a lot of time. He studied and he trained really hard for that, for the tests and all that. I had learned and gotten certified in paramedical tattoo while we lived in Georgia. So before we went back, I became a tattoo artist, but specifically for like reconstructive tattoo. So not what you would think. This is more like permanent makeup, scar covering, vitiligo, things like that.
Right.
And areola reconstruction, things that are used more for a reconstructive purpose than anything else. We moved back to Hawaii, and then we opened a tattoo studio because I had this license. And so I applied for the license there, got it. That was actually going really well. And then COVID happened. And there were lockdowns in Hawaii, and they just locked it down and locked it down and locked it down. It devastated the economy. It devastated all the local businesses. We watched business after business around us close their doors, hairstylists, other tattoo artists, estheticians, restaurants, like all of our business neighbors in our our little building. We just watched them shutter. And so that was a scary time for us,
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was working in order to pay rent on the studio while we grew the business, and so was Ryan. But it was really difficult with they were constantly shutting our business down, so we were having to. It was a mess, but at the time, like we had been doing so well up until that point because we were the top medical tattoo studio in the state, and we had been covered on CNBC for what we were doing. We had people that were flying from Dubai to come to us.
Incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was amazing, but it was just like, the doors closed all of a sudden because the doors kept getting closed by the local government. And then, and then I was working in tourism sales at the time while I was working in the studio, and tourism got decimated. Nobody was coming out there. Yeah. And so I got furloughed from my job, and I just went, oh shoot, what do I do? And I just went, well, I have to, we have to pay the rent on the studio. We have to keep we have to try to keep the lights on while we wait for this to go on. And so basically what I did was I just went out and I said, what can I learn that's high leverage that'll pay enough that it can pay the taxes in Hawaii, and then I also pay to keep this business open, and then also so that we can afford to live while Ryan's still in training. It was just a lot, while we were, and so I ended up learning Salesforce, which is a tech skill. I studied for 31 days. I paid a total of $362 for this technical certification and the exam. And then I applied for a job that paid $70,000 a year that was remote, 4-day work week for a local company. They hired me. I went from unemployed, making $28,000 a year, to 45 days later being employed in this tech job that said it required an advanced computer science degree. Obviously not, because I was degree free. And that was the second crack where I was like, wait a minute, this is a reoccurring theme where I'm noticing like there's no legal requirement keeping me out of these jobs. No, there's no legal requirement for a computer science degree for this job. There is a requirement for a certain certification that has to be filled. And I had that. And that was the only criteria they cared about. And that was where I started realizing that if you deconstruct job listings and what skills employers are actually looking for, and you stack them in the correct order, you can get pretty much any job.
Mm-hmm.
And that is when we started Degree Free, because I started replicating this process with friends and family, and it kept working. And I was like, okay, so we're on to something here. But it's just very strategic. It's just research and then learning in a specific order.
Yeah. So you said that's where you kind of made this transition, because you were then beginning to help other people. So can you tell us now, for anybody who's not listening, a little bit about what Degree Free is and what it was you were doing? Simple terms, I get deconstructing the job so you can, take the steps to get there. But tell me kind of how you formed that in your brain and thought, okay, let's do this now,
So originally, like I said, the process that I was taking people through was I was just helping friends and family who were going, I want to change jobs, or I want to do, what have you, and I'm just not sure how to do it. And I would just take them and I had developed a process when I was doing this research myself to vet all of the requirements, to vet the learning options, to source nationally and locally, and just compare and make sure I was putting the right skill stack together. And then after I did that, when it worked for me, and then it worked for another friend, and then it worked for my sister, and then it worked for somebody else, I said, okay, there's something here. Like this is a process that works. And so after I started doing that, then we started the podcast where we started talking about what we were doing. And Ryan helped me because he's very technical. I could do nothing without him. He and I are business partners in every sense of the word.
Good balance, right?
Yes, he does. And he enables me to do all the fun stuff. So he does all of the, he keeps the business running, and I do all of the fun. I do all the talking. I do all of the work with the young adults. But we started working with adults, and then realized we had a community at one point of adult job seekers. And then I had posted something in there about their kids, about their high schoolers. And we got an overwhelming response, more interest than we had ever gotten of anything else that we were ever doing. And that told us that the need was actually for young adults, because they're in a pivotal time, and there's a lot of uncertainty, especially with the amount of money that's about to get spent, the amount of time that's about to be committed, and the amount of energy that they're about to use. And that's when we realized that really where this is super high leverage is for people who are between the ages of 16 and 20. And so I started working with a bunch of young adults and just seeing like, okay, let's see how this process works. Let's put you through all of these, this process that we developed that's now the launch program. And we just kept getting really good results. Like we were getting just unreal. People were learning just off to the races, learning amazing things. They were finding really unique career options that really fit their needs and how they wanted to live. We were getting kids that were coming in and they were getting hired 3 days later because we were just really targeting, what they were. And that was not even something that we were intending to do, but that's what happens when you pick work strategically and it actually fits what they want. And then they know what they're doing and why. And we just saw this massive difference in the amount of stewardship they felt over their plans, how excited they were about the future. And it fixed all of these problems that exist currently with the way that we guide young adults out of high school. And we just went, oh, this is the thing that we want to do, because this is high impact. This has generational impact, in that we saw kids who otherwise would have gotten caught up in student loan debt, wasted years of time, like literally the freest years of their life, as I had just experienced, doing so many things and learning so much because I had no debt and I had nobody telling me where to be all the time. And I was able to experiment. And
well, I was going to say, because the thing that's like sitting in the back of my brain the whole time you're talking about this right now is, the things that are benefiting the students in high school. But I would say that one of the things, and it causes a lot of not pain for me, in the literal sense, but I struggle so much of the time when I see high school students who are in high school trying to figure out at 14, 15, 16 years old, what am I going to do? Because I have to take all these classes and get ready for that. And knowing their brains aren't even fully developed yet. And then they're 17 or 18 graduating from high school, and knowing just by looking back on those years in my own life, I didn't really know then what I would want to do now, and it's just, there's so many times I say, don't put so much pressure on yourself to think you need to have it all figured out by 18, because I promise you that when you're 28, you're probably going to be going, what did I really want to do this? I think it's more rare that someone really young really knows what they want to do young and pursues that and sticks with it. Hence your own scenario where you were working with adults first that wanted to change jobs. I mean, they were in positions and it was like, this isn't what I want to do. But do I want to go through 4 more years of college? Do I want to go back and have to do everything over again? What is my
only
degree good for?
27, and that's so many people do that. And that's because we push them to buy them before they're ready to do so. And that's why only 27% of grads even work anywhere close to their field of study. And even those, a lot of those that even do are unhappy in their jobs because they didn't know the type of environment they'd be in or the schedule it'd give them or even the income. A lot of people have no idea what they're going to make. And so then they're really dissatisfied with the life that they have afterwards because they didn't know or that wasn't taken into consideration because that's just not how we teach people to pick work, which is crazy because that's how you should pick. It's based on what you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think my own personal experience was similar in the sense that I started college with one end goal in mind, got burnt out and thought, I'm not doing that many years of college, So now what can I do with my history degree? Well, only thing you can do with history is teach, right? So, but they don't even put you in your student internship until the last semester before you graduate. And it was like, I would never have been a teacher if I had done that earlier, but then you're stuck with this degree and this is all you've done. And you're like you said, that isn't what I really wanted to do. So you're there and you're not super happy there, And
then so many people think the only way to change.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so many people think the only way to change jobs after that is to buy another degree. And that's how you end up with people with master's degrees that have negative ROI. And that's more than half of master's degree holders at this point are experiencing that. And it's because we just teach it all wrong. You don't buy first, you buy last. That's the highest risk thing you can do. It's crazy to do it. It's crazy to do it that way. But the system is, there's an $848 machine behind that. And it's one-way debt. It's bankruptcy exempt. And so they just need you to sign the first time.
We talk about, because I've heard you talk a little bit about this before, but a little bit about the economics involved in degrees and in college and in making that decision, because I do think it's really important to understand the long-term effects of making that decision. And especially if you're not really clear on what you want to do. That's, if you're not clear you want to be a doctor and this is your path, then, it's really important to understand. So would you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I'd love to. This goes into, and this is where I'll, if someone lets me, I'll get really into the weeds, Suzanne. So watch out.
I'll rein you in.
Okay. But I'm going to sum it up a little bit. So we had done some research where we went through the BLS and we counted how many jobs in our country actually require college degrees legally. And the number is shockingly low. It's 7.7%. It's almost none. It's less than 10%.
Yeah.
So when you see that these high schools or programs and homeschool programs are very also prone to this. In fact, more so than public schools. Homeschoolers go to college at a higher rate. And so they buy degrees more. And I think a lot of that is emotional. It's parents trying to show that they did a good job.
Right.
But it is insane, in my opinion. And this is strong language, I know, but someone's got to say it. And it's insane to spend the amount of time, effort, and to put in and invest in your children the way that homeschool parents do, to turn around and put them on a conveyor belt meat grinder after you just spent 12 years keeping them out of it. It's insane to try to justify your parenting, to try to justify your teaching. You did a good job. Leave it alone. You don't have to put them in debt to prove that to anybody. Nobody cares. Unless your child needs a degree to do whatever it is that they are going to do. Civil engineers. There's a very small list. It's all the ISTs. Speech language pathologists. Again, also too, just because a degree is required does not mean that job is going to fit their needs either. And that's unfortunately something that I do see a lot of times where people come in, I want to be whatever IST. And I just go, okay, that's 8 years of schooling. And it's 8 years of schooling. It's going to cost you $180,000. And now you're not going to be able to stay home with your kids. Or now you're not going to be able to start a business or buy a home or get married. And so there's just not a lot of, and it's just one of those cognitive dissonance things that I see. And it's because college marketing is very effective and nobody is not prone to it. We all are as a country. This is it's a very emotional decision.
It's an American dream thing, right? That's the way people view it.
Yes, and we've gone so long ignoring all the red flags. We just, and to be fair, the government, who makes a lot of money off of this, and so do the colleges, have gone to great lengths to disguise the actual outcomes as well. So it's not entirely on parents. It's difficult to see the actual picture unless you dig into it all the time, as I do.
Right.
But that's something I wanted to say, is that, so when you see these programs say, oh, 80% of our kids go to go on to college, I'm like, I'm horrified. I'm like, that's terrible. It should quite literally be the opposite. And so when I see all these college admission rates, I just see the stats. 41% of them are going to leave. 41% of them are going to be spending money and time with no reason for being there, zero. The other 59% are going to spend 5.5 years there, not 4. It doesn't take 4. It takes 5.5 years to graduate on average. They're going to spend between $104,000 and $156,000. That is the average cost of a bachelor's degree in this country right now. The all-in lifetime cost, tuition, interest, lost wages, is $500,000. People do not realize what they are signing themselves up for, signing their kids up for, and even if they're homeschoolers, even if they are able to actually do all of these things on time, that doesn't mean that it was something they needed to do. And when you think of it's the money is one thing, but it's the opportunity cost of the time too. And that's something I think that people just don't. If you were to put your child, the amount of people I see do this with their sons specifically, like their sons, they do okay homeschooling, and then they send them to school for business or sports management or silly things that they just don't need degrees for. Go work in that industry. What are you doing? Go get an entry level job. Go carry coffee for, seriously, and people, oh, they can't. Yes, they can. You never tried to apply. That's one of the things that people say they can't do that without a degree. I'm like, you don't know that. You've never had your child try to get those jobs. Never.
Right.
You went and bought first. You paid $100,000 before you had your kid try to get the exact same job that they're going to try to get in 4 years. It's the same thing. And they do this to their kids, and it puts them on a back foot for the rest of their career. Because if you just picture, and I see this all the time, because it's starting to change a little bit with homeschoolers, where they're starting to just go, this doesn't make sense. And I just see all these red flags. And a lot of it is too because of the colleges at this point. I mean, if you look at them objectively, if you speak to a college student, very little, it's hard to call it higher education anymore. I don't, because I'm like, this isn't higher education. I'm sick of pretending like, I'm not going to call it that. I'm not going to do it. That's not what it is. I don't know what it is, but it's not that.
Right.
And so you listen to the way that they speak, the things that they say, the things that they think, and it's much more akin to a cult than it is to anything else. And they get this wild economic theory, they get wild social theory. They come out with a religion, like colleges teach a religion of their own. They have their own orthodoxy, they have their own hierarchy, they have their own, they have their own cardinal sins. Like, you can't say these things, you can't ask these questions, you can't do these things. Yeah. And if you do, you're ostracized. You see that with faculty all the time, right? Every once in a while you get somebody that sticks their head up and they just get, they get mashed down real quick. But your kids, 4 years of working, unbelievable. I would take, and I hire people, I would take a kid, and I would much rather prefer your child 22 years old, 4 years of work experience at Home Depot, not even in something I need them to do, than a college degree. And the thing is, Intelligent.com just did a survey, and they said that I am not alone. They surveyed 1,000 hiring managers. All of these hiring managers had a bachelor's degree or higher, and they said they're actively avoiding hiring recent college graduates. 71% of them admitted to firing one in the last year because they just can't, their expectations are crazy, like for salary, because they think because they spent $100K, they're going to make $100K. That's not how it works. And it's just like, your kids are going to be, if you put them in this debt now, they're going to be competing for the exact same jobs that people who are getting wise to this now they're just spending 6 months to get their kids' basic skill sets, minimum effective dose skill sets, and getting them in to compete with your kids. And they're going to pick the 18-year-old every single time. Every single time.
You can grow them up in your, company and in your workforce that you want. You can make them what they want, what you want them to be. And very different than the philosophical degree that students from college bring into the workplace. I think that, like you said, they have some unrealistic expectations about what that has done for them, not to mention all of the additional extra education they got on all the other theories and philosophies of life, So I think that it's really interesting to kind of point that out. And, I love to hear the statistics. I don't remember them all the time, but, it's overwhelming when you start to process just the numbers that you're using about, the ROI on the master's degrees, the amount of money that you're spending, and and the opportunity cost. I think that there's so many people who look at, now we're going to college, and they think of all of the positive pro things, but really never think of the opportunity cost that's involved. And it's like, you don't have to live completely off the charts, but think about what you learned in those years of your life right after high school and when you were first in those college age years, by just experience and doing things and trying different things. And you can find your happy places. You can find what you enjoy doing and what you definitely didn't want to do the rest of your life. It's just so different. It's such a different approach. And I love that. That's one of the things, I think one of the things that you also do that is, I think, very interesting about your approach. And we'll talk about that. I know you have the launch program. I know you have the workbooks that people can do also. But I love that you have them think about, what do you want to be doing in 5 years? Like, what do you want your life to look like? Because so much of the time it is only about, what do you want your job to be? It isn't, what do you want your life to look like? What do you want to be doing with your life? What kind of parent are you going to, do you want to be a stay-at-home mom? Do you want to be a homeschool mom? Those things need to be factored in as well. And I think that so much of the time those questions are not asked of, students, but I love the way that you do that. Can you tell me just a little bit more for people who are listening? Like, what else are you having them evaluate going into this?
Absolutely. So it is my belief, and this is something that we've seen in the long tail results of the launch program, because this is how, and really it's not like we reinvented the wheel. We just went back to the wheel, and the wheel is pick based on your needs, because Maslow's hierarchy of needs exists for a reason.
Yeah.
And our complete disconnect of just telling these high schoolers, oh yeah, just follow your hearts or your random personality tests. I just don't, I get a lot of questions about that, about the personality tests and strengths assessment. I'm like, your high school strengths or passions should not be the thing dictating what you were spending $100,000 on. It definitely should not be the thing dictating whatever you're going to do for work. The reason is because I believe that you need to you need some stripes before you're able to find where you really settle in. And I've seen that in my own life. I see that in other people's lives, because for me, I didn't arrive to this problem that I wanted to solve, to this business, until I was 25, 26 years old. And that's because I had worked and I identified a problem and something I cared about. And then I had the intersection of work experience and skills in order to bring it to bear. And that is something that they send their kids to college because they're afraid. They're afraid they're going to miss out. They're afraid they're going to be behind. You can put your child ahead of 50% of the U.S. population by not putting them in student loan debt. That's all you have to do, is not buy. And people get hung up on the scholarships or the merit aid or the whatever. And I just want to clarify and say, if they're handing that to you, it's because your child doesn't need to go to college. They're handing that to you because they need your child. Your child doesn't need them. They need your child.
Good point. Yeah.
They have already determined that your child is likely to have a successful outcome. And so they're going to white label that success and say, that is because of us. It's not. It's because of you. It's because of what you have already done. It's baked in.
So true. Yeah.
So that's something that it makes me really furious that colleges do that, because they just white label this thing. They just white label this thing, and that's something that we don't do in the launch program. Like, it's not a result of what we do. We equip parents to help their kids take the next step, but it is not us that does that. It's the child it's the kid and the parents who do that, and that's who gets that result and who is already going to get that result. But for us, it really is figuring out those basic needs, because your schedule, if you work a horrible schedule, and there's widely available data on this, if you work a terrible commute or a horrible schedule, you're going to hate your life. You're going to hate your job, because even if you like your work, but it robs you of time that you want to spend other ways, you are going to resent it. In the same way that you meet a lot of people who are like, It's just my passion to teach. They say that when they're 22, 23, they're all bright-eyed and shiny. They go in, they hate it. The work environment is horrible. They have no support.
Yep.
They go in, the income barely covers their student loans. It's because they did not consider the things that they wanted out of their work. And that day in, day out, they're going to have to go do this thing. They would have been so much happier working at a plant nursery and eventually buying it. And they could have done that with 4 years or 5 years of time and the amount of money they're about to spend. Right. And not even that. It's like, and this is the thing, is the real core of it is parents having to be okay, because parents are the major drivers of college degree purchase. Parents decide if kids go to college. It's not the kids. It's not. It's parents. If they want their kids to go to college or they push them to, they will. That's how it works. And so parents have to redefine success, and they have to redefine it in a more accurate way. Success is your child living the way that they want. Success is your child being able to do the things that they care about in their life, whether that is play competitive sports, like they want to travel and go to jiu-jitsu tournaments, or they want to be an MMA fighter, they want to be a race car driver, they want to make claymation in their spare time, and they need the artistic space to do. They need physical space, and then they need mental space with their job not stressing them out. They need not student loans telling them what they have to do in their life. And your child wants to be a writer. Okay, you know what really helps being a writer and being able to publish books in this day and age is not having a ton of student loan debt dictating what kind of work you have to do to pay off the loans. And that's where it really. This is where the definition of success matters so much. I had a young man on my podcast named Bradley. Bradley had $180,000 in student loans from the Culinary Institute of America because at 17 years old, he was told by every trusted adult in his life, and there is are you responsible when you're 18? Yeah, you are. But we can't ignore the fact that societally speaking, we treat them like they're kids, and then all of a sudden overnight they're adults, and now they're informed enough to make these ridiculous bankruptcy exempt purchases, which we don't allow them to do in literally any other aspect of life. No other aspect. Can't even have a beer. Yeah. But they can pay $100,000 for a piece of paper that they don't know that they need. And his life, as a result of that, his choices were so limited. And he wanted to be he wanted to be a pastry chef because his Nana had been a wonderful, wonderful baker. But, to start in New York City, as on the line at a pastry place, you make $15 an hour. You can't afford those loans. It quite literally robbed him of his joy. It made him resent the thing that he had gone to school for, which was something that he had loved. And it made him financially unable to follow his passion, which for him was success. And so he was robbed of his ability to do that by his student loans. And that is what and that's what happens when we conflate these things and we confuse them. And then we as adults do not inform kids because they just can't understand. I recently talked to someone who said, it's just a financial literacy problem. And I said, it's not. They can't understand. What adult can understand $500,000 laying around? It's hard for us to understand it. It's hard to picture. It's even hard to picture it. That's just not an easy thing to do. And so for them, they can't understand because it's future earnings. It's future them's problem. And they're so young and their brains aren't fully formed. And so for parents, it's like they don't have to go right now. If they need to go, then go in a few years. The college is not going anywhere. It's a car dealership. They don't care. They'll take your money any day of the week. They'll take it anyway, later, any day of the week.
Yeah. I think that I think that there's been, more and more over the years too. We've seen the people who've benefited even from things like gap years and, just having a little bit of time to process before they go to college and make some of those decisions. And even with that, so much of the time I've seen students who had one trajectory in mind, but took that year, and that has then become their new trajectory because whatever they were doing, if it was a job that they worked, if it was missions that they did, if it was, an internship just at some whatever, but they all of a sudden now recognize I want to do this and I don't have to go to that college that I was planning to go to do it, And I think that just even having that mindset to give a little bit more time is really helpful, but also to give experience. And because this is obviously not just for homeschool students. You are providing an opportunity for students from any background. Homeschoolers, they might have a little bit more freedom and time to think about it. But kids who've been in four walls of, the institutions all day long for their entire lives, they maybe haven't even stopped to process some
No,
of
they
those
haven't.
things. So gap years, even just start there. Give them some time and space, physically, mentally, whatever. So let's go, because we're going to wrap up here soon, but let's go a little bit more. How do people find you, connect with you? You said the ideal age is like 16 to 20, 21-year-olds, right? So how do they connect with you and start this journey to helping their students or themselves figure out, what are my next steps?
Sure. So degreefree.com/launch is our application for our launch program, which is the one-on-one service that we do with young adults to build their career plans and help them figure out what they need to learn, the order they need to learn it, why they're learning it, licenses, certifications, very strategic things they need to do to get hired. And that's where a lot of the high impact work comes in, because it's always customized to every individual. So it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of research, and that's where you put in the time, you put in the research for every individual, and you will always get outsized results. And that's very much a homeschool ethos as well. But that's how we do it.
Yeah.
And then we do have the Degree Freeway workbook, which will help parents get to those 3 jobs that actually fit their kids' needs. They're going to have to do the bridge research locally and in a timely manner, because you always have to do your research at the right time that you're looking, because the things will change. So the best resource is actually the internet, but you have to know what you're looking for. Otherwise, how are you going to find it in 3,000 to 6,000 different jobs? So it helps you go through your child's very methodically. What do they need? What do they need out of their work to be successful in their own eyes and to get what they want? And then once you have that, then it'll take you through, the budgeting, all the boring stuff. And then it'll help you prioritize those things and then think about what jobs are actually going to fit that. So you know what you're looking for, and you know how to look for what the actual requirements are when you're looking locally, because these differ, right? Different counties, different states, and we work all over the country. So that's what that does. And there's a parent and a young adult workbook. So you're not doing it over their shoulder, because that goes really horribly. And instead you do it with them. And that's very high impact. And then we have the Degree Free podcast as well, where Ryan and I talk over current events, news, updates to the job market, states that are removing degree requirements, which happens. There was 3 2 weeks ago, all within one day of each other. Yep. And then we also interview successful degree-free people from all different types of industry, radio, tech, just, we have had one HVAC, but we're not just trades. We're everything. And so we do a wide range of people that come on from all kinds of companies. We're fortunate to have really cool guests too. Tiny companies you've probably never heard of, like Meta, Dell, Nike,
just those little companies out there.
Amazon, tiny little small businesses, but they talk about how they self-educated and how they taught themselves and what they learned to get into their jobs, and that's really interesting and inspirational as well. And so big fan of those interviews. There's a lot to be learned in those as well.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you pointed out in what you were just saying, not all of the degree free equals trades. A lot of times when you start to talk degree free, right, and not having to go to 4 years of college, people automatically, again, it's the way we're conditioned to think about higher education, right? It's like this, it's either going to be this or this. And I love that you pointed that out, because it's not this or this. There's a different way to get to all the options. Like there's a different way to get there.
I appreciate the awareness that those people, bring to the table, like Mike Rowe and Charlie Kirk and such, but it is my biggest pet peeve is the trades only thing that drives me absolutely up the wall. And my youngest sister's a structural welder. So it's not from lack of appreciation. She outworks the median master's degree holder. She's debt free. She's 23. She's married, she's built a wonderful life because it fit her needs. Yeah. But you don't do that. So many people just do trades first. It's like, no. You still have to figure out what do they need. Does a trade fit that? You can't just say, oh, you're not going to college, go be an electrician. Drives me up the wall.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. I want to just point out that in just a couple of weeks, you will be here in Florida at our convention in May, end of May. So I'll look forward to seeing you in person there, and other people can as well. So if you're listening and you are going to be joining us in Orlando at the Gaylord Palms Resort for this amazing convention weekend, you will have a chance to hear Hannah speak and interact and connect and ask more questions. So we're excited about that. And Florida's a fun place. So
I am so excited to come.
yeah. Thanks for listening to the Not by the Book podcast from the Florida Parent Educators Association. To learn more about homeschooling in Florida or to find resources to help you on this amazing journey, visit our website at FPEA.com. If you have any suggestions for future guests, contact me, Suzanne, at notbythebook@fpea.com. Thanks again for listening, and be inspired to live your life not by the book.